Hi, I'm Rob Sheen. I'm the Executive Director of the Source Conference, and I'm here today with Joe Basirico
Hey, Rob.
from Security Innovation. And we were going to have a chat about some security topics. So
Yeah, sounds great.
cool. So I'm going to put you on the spot. So you're going to be doing a talk later today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your talk?
Yeah, I'll be talking about some of the social aspects of kind of integrating communication around getting hackers and security researchers to essentially tell you about the vulnerabilities that they find. So this includes things like how to message that program, how to roll out a bug bounty program, and just kind of how to do internal and external messaging.
Okay, so kind of more taking like a programmatic approach to security?
Yeah. One of the things that we see a lot of companies struggle with is just their ability to communicate effectively with security researchers. So security researchers are out there, they're finding vulnerabilities in your software, whether you like it or not, and under most circumstances, they want to tell you about it. And so how can you make that as easy as possible? And one of the ways to do that is, of course, bug bounty programs. But way before you get to a bug bounty program, you might want to roll out just some external messaging, like how you want to be communicated with, and how you get your marketing team and your legal team involved, and things like that, and how you want to kind of structure that conversation.
Right. So be more proactive.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges I've seen, we were actually chatting about it a little earlier, is when you have companies who've never dealt with security researchers, and the first time they do, it's kind of terrifying to them.
Yeah.
And they lawyer up and they start setting up nasty letters. They kind of handle it. What would you recommend to those kind of folks who have never dealt with that before?
Yeah. So first up, first contact to a security researcher should probably not be a lawyer. I would start there. It's a good place to kind of start. Reach out, whether that's with a marketing team or another engineer or somebody who can start that ball rolling. I think it's important, that you treat the security researcher with respect. Again, they're kind of doing free testing for you, so and they certainly could have done nothing with it, sold it on the black market, or done a number of other kind of more nefarious things with that finding. But they came to you, so straight up, it's best to start with kind of that mutual respect. Again, just making it easy, making sure that the security researcher can easily find your security page on your website, for example, like mywebsite.com/security should be a page that gives them information about how you want to be communicated, or having a security email address is really important, and having someone who's knowledgeable kind of on the other side of that. Yeah.
So really kind of thinking through how you want them to interact with you before they interact with you.
Yeah. And it can be scary, right? I remember one of the first times Security Innovation follows kind of strict responsible disclosure, which for us means that we never publicize vulnerabilities that we find. So we'll work with that company as long as it takes. If it takes a month for them to fix it or 6 months for them to fix it, we're still not going to go and publish it on our blog. But I remember before, this was a long time ago, I made my first responsible disclosure phone call, and the phone call ended with, okay, well, how long do we have to fix this? And in my naive brain, I thought he was asking, how long will it take to fix it? And so my answer was, I don't know, 2 weeks. And they said, oh, that's very generous. How about a month? And I said, sure, take a month, take 2. And then we hung up, and I was kind of recounting the whole story to a coworker of mine. And he goes, they were probably expecting you to go public at the end of that 2-month window. And I go, oh, so I should probably call him back and let him know that we're not going public. But that's one of those conversations that you need to have with the security researcher. You need to know, okay, you're telling us about this, but what's your policy on disclosure? Are you going to go open disclosure once it's fixed? Do I have a hard timeline? Is it negotiable? As long as you see forward progress towards a fix, is it okay if we kind of continue keeping this under wraps until we can have a fix out to protect our customers? But that's not always the case.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting when you have mindsets behind the people that are finding the vulnerabilities in the first place. Because on the one hand, you have some people that no more free bugs, and they won't disclose anything without being paid for it.
Yeah.
And you have other people that are doing it just for activism purposes, or they're just trying to get companies to do the right thing. What are some of your thoughts on the right way to do disclosure?
Yeah, I appreciate that disclosure and the security industry in general is a giant ecosystem. On one end of the spectrum, you have folks like us that are really hardline, responsible disclosure, never disclose it out externally. On the other end, you have selling vulnerabilities to the highest bidder and publishing for free on Pastebin, right? And without that whole spectrum, I think people would be maybe less likely to feel that pressure to fix and remediate those security vulnerabilities. I remember, just 10 years ago, arguing for buffer overflows to get fixed. Like I'm saying, hey, this is an exploitable buffer overflow. It's going to be really bad for you if this, somebody else finds this. You need to fix it. And they go, well, what's the likelihood that somebody else is going to be able to find that, or somebody else is going to be able to exploit it? And then, Microsoft kind of felt the pain of that in the code red NIMDA era, and I think everybody kind of got their eyes opened in that scenario. But it's only because of this wide spectrum. And so my personal feeling is that it takes that wide spectrum to make forward progress. But for security innovation, we really focus on what's the best value to the end user. One of the things that got me into security in the first place was, my parents, like most of our parents, aren't super tech savvy. And they're super afraid of using their credit cards online or getting their identity stolen, and they have this concern about the software and the devices and things like that they're using, but they have no ability to protect themselves, right? Like they can't make solid security decisions around what settings to tweak or how to set up their firewall at home or whatever. And I just felt like that was unfair, right? Like, it's fine for me. Like, I've done this for a long time, and I don't mind tweaking around with firewall settings. But for your normal end user, like, they should be able to take their device out of the box and just use it without fear. So building and deploying secure software is a major component of that.
When you have companies or systems that do have vulnerabilities, this one of the contentious things I've seen these days is people talk about, if somebody hacks you and they find a hole, should you hack them back? Or conversely, if you are proactively looking for holes and you find them, should you patch those machines on their behalf?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's gotten us into some pretty interesting scenarios. I don't know if you remember, but back in that Code Red NIMDA era, there was a benign worm that tried to go out and patch all of those servers and ended up causing more damage than the original worm because it was downloading all of the Windows updates and it just saturated the network and caused a lot of problems. So, I'm not a huge fan of like vigilante hacking or eye for an eye sort of thing, just because it kind of gets us into this odd scenario of where both sides are malicious. Right. And one of the things that I really like to do is kind of serve as a partner to the organizations we work with and the organizations that I just interact with on a day-to-day basis, right? So if I stumble across a vulnerability in some app that I use, I want them to fix that. I want them to have all of the knowledge and ability to remediate that vulnerability because I'm a customer, right? Like if I sit on that or they try to come back with like legal attacks, like, well, they're going to lose out on the security knowledge and they're also going to lose out on a customer. And then later on when they do get breached, they're going to lose out on a lot of other things. So it's good to have that kind of back and forth balance.
Speaking of consequences and implications of things, what are your thoughts on the big Equifax breach? Everyone's asking about that. I mean, people that don't know anything about security are asking me about that lately. Like, hey, what do you think? So.
Yeah, I got an email from my parents. Like, do I have to lock my credit or what? The Equifax breach, sadly, I think is kind of a textbook case of how not to do security, right? So from the very beginning to the, even now with their new interim CEO and their CTO and CISO that all stepped down. I mean, the original vulnerability could have been easily patched with good patch management software. It could have been known about. It could have been handled properly. They could have done better disaster recovery. They could have done better breach analysis to know what was happening. And kind of all of those things connected together to create this perfect storm of so many people losing data. And then they followed it up with kind of a not exactly well thought out plan to remediate and fix. This is one of the things that I actually think having a bug bounty program or having a social application security program would have helped. Certainly the attackers that attacked them wouldn't have turned that over for $500 on a bug bounty program. But I imagine somebody else would have. There are a lot of eyes, and that was a known vulnerability at the time. And so having that bug bounty program out there probably would have meant they would have known about it and known to patch it.
So I've been kind of racking my brain about, all right, what do we do about this? And so you mentioned one of them, the obvious one is locking credit reporting, because essentially every adult with a credit card or any kind of credit account now is essentially their social, their address, it's all public information effectively, right?
Yeah.
The other implication I've been thinking of is essentially that means all other companies, every company on the planet that's been using socials as an authenticator, kind of now needs to reissue all their PINs.
Yeah.
Things like, what do you think about that? I think that's going to cost billions of dollars. Honestly.
It is. I mean, if you want to get into the nitty gritty about it, like your social security number was never really intended to be this unique identifier, and it kind of just became that because people were using it. And I mean, when I was in college, my college ID was my social security number, and it was up on public pages, stuck to the outside of classrooms and stuff, and so I mean it's out there, and that data is gone. I mean, like trying to put toothpaste back in a tube, right? Like it's not going to go back in.
Right. So is this the watershed moment where we're going to stop using Social Security for things?
Of course not. No. I mean, it's also not the time where every company is going to stop using plain text passwords or using ORMs for all of their databases and all the other things that we should be doing. But hopefully it will be kind of a beacon of what can go wrong, where you have a company whose job it is to collect all of this information, right? Like they're a single hub. If you were looking at multiple companies to target for the biggest bang for your buck, if I was going to breach one of these companies, and I looked at, just thinking about like recent breaches with LinkedIn and Target and Equifax. Well, like LinkedIn, you get usernames and passwords and my business contacts. I know that's not a big deal. Target, you get my credit card. That's a little bit of a bigger deal. With Equifax, you get everything, and you get everything in one-stop shop to become me, essentially, digitally. Everything from social security numbers to addresses to, all of those little bits of verification data. That's a pretty impactful thing. So hopefully people will start to rethink this. If the other two companies take note and make changes, I think that's a good outcome. I don't think it's the end of using social security numbers as identifiers, though. That's never going to go away.
Yeah. So I asked this question the other day in our little speed networking section. What do you see as the most challenging problem in InfoSec?
That's a good question.
Cleaning up that Equifax.
Yeah. One of the big difficulties, I think, is around education of testers and developers and people building the software around the impact. But education only happens after you get budget and buy-in from higher up folks. And so, there's this whole kind of trickle down path where you start with somebody with a good idea, like we should stop writing security vulnerabilities. How do we do that? Well, we need education, or we need assessments, or we need process improvements, or whatever we need. But then we roll it out and we don't give the developers time, or we don't give the developers and testers access to the right education pieces, or we kind of say, stop writing security vulnerabilities, and then we're surprised when they continue. So I think that giving people, treating security like another aspect of software quality, and really giving developers and testers the time to focus on it. Stop thinking about it like an add-on at the end. There's a lot of folks we work with that have gone the entire development lifecycle through their entire process, and they have a finished product, and now they're coming to us for an assessment. And that's great. Like, I'm happy to, do that. But starting in the beginning and anticipating some of these vulnerabilities and doing the education necessary to minimize the number of vulnerabilities that get into the product in the first place is way more impactful. There's a big benefit, though, of using some of these modern frameworks. One of the things that I really like recommending is leveraging modern frameworks that like ORMs, like some of these templating engines that kind of get rid of SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Developers shouldn't have to implement their own CSRF protections and things like that. Instead, you can just offload that to a mature framework. And as long as you have a mature framework, you don't have to think about it. You start to solve the business security issues instead, which I think is better.
So I think I saw something online that you were involved in some kind of a nonprofit.
I was, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so about 7 years ago, some friends of mine had a dinner party, and we were all complaining about how we see so many white guys in security and technology in the STEM fields, and how women and underrepresented minorities just really struggle to get into the STEM industries. And throughout the evening, we kept talking about it, and finally, by the end, we were like, well, let's fix it. And so we started Technically Learning. And the goal with Technically Learning is to work with girls and underrepresented minorities in really young, in elementary school, because all of our studies and research looked at that people really start to opt out of STEM programs really early, even second, third grade, which is really a bummer. And so we developed this curriculum, and we rolled it out to a lot of the Seattle area schools. I'm actually really happy to say that we merged with code.org actually about 3 years ago. And so when Code was just starting to get off the ground, Hattie came to us and said, you guys have methodology and employees, and I have connections and money, let's get together and do something amazing. And clearly code.org is doing a great thing. So yeah, it's great.
Cool, glad to hear it. I like it when people actually fix problems instead of just complain about them. That's great.
Yeah, I think if I would have known how much work it was going to be, we might have second-guessed ourselves, but we're just gung-ho enough to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Want to give us a little 30-second plug for what Security Innovation does?
Sure. So Security Innovation helps our customers reduce their overall application risk. So through understanding their risk and mitigating that risk. And we do that essentially 3 different ways. Through education. So we have a pretty decent library of computer-based training and instructor-led training. We do it through assessment. So my team does a lot of penetration testing, code review, architecture analysis, and that kind of thing to help mitigate vulnerabilities and discover those vulnerabilities and help mitigate them. And then we also help you become more mature in regards to security maturity and security process through process analysis and like SDLC gap analysis and things like that. And so the hope is with those three things that an organization can learn what's wrong, educate themselves to mitigate the vulnerabilities that they have, and implement some process changes so that those things don't happen in the future.
Awesome. How do they reach you?
Yeah, they can contact me by email at just joe@securityinnovation.com or go to our website at securityinnovation.com.
Awesome. Great. Nice to talk to you, and I can't wait to see your talk later.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Thanks.